But first, we all should be furious, not based on some phony, ginned-up cable news outrage story, but based on the fact that our police officers are coming under fire. Targeted and ambush-style attacks across the country. It has happened multiple times just in the last few months. Most recently, 2 deputies murdered in Georgia. Deputies Jonathan Koleski and Marshall Irvin Jr. went to a home to serve a warrant in Cobb County, northwest of Atlanta, on Thursday. When nobody answered, they began walking back to their police cruiser. Then someone else pulled up in a car and shooting began. A second suspect came from the home and then opened fire on them, hitting both deputies. Here's the radio traffic as other officers tried to help the deputies.
There is an officer not breathing. They have CPR in progress.
The officer signal 50, they got him not breathing, not conscious, CPR in progress.
I heard someone advise the shooter is inside the residence.
The deputies were both married and were fathers. Deputy Koleski was an Army vet who served in Iraq and had been with the sheriff's office for 15 years. Deputy Irvin had 2 children and had been with the department for 10 years. They'll be buried later this week. Cobb County Sheriff Craig Owens spoke about the tremendous loss.
They was outstanding men of character and integrity, family men, loved by their family and their kids. When we have a tragedy like this in our law enforcement family, it not only affects us here locally, but it affects us across the United States and even worldwide.
2 men are charged in connection with the officer's death, one with 2 counts of aggravated assault on a police officer and 2 counts of murder. The other has not been charged in the shooting, but he faces the original theft by deception charge from the warrant the deputies were executing. Both have been denied bond. This tragic incident coming a little more than 2 weeks after an eerily similar scene in Oklahoma City. 2 deputies serving eviction papers at a home when a gunman opened fire. The suspect ran from the scene and led police on a chase in a pickup truck hauling a boat before he was caught at an Air Force base, later charged with first-degree murder. The Oklahoma County Sheriff was understandably emotional as he talked about the support his officer received from other departments.
The law enforcement it's a tight community, and I'm so thankful. They were screaming across the state for my guys.
Sergeant Bobby Schwartz died from his injuries. He worked for the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Department for 25 years. As a father, a grandfather, remembered for being quick to help other deputies in need. Deputy Mark Johns suffered life-threatening injuries in the attack, but was released 4 days later. Sheriff's office calling it a miracle as he continues to recover. And that was a month after an armed suspect in Rochester, New York, ran up to 2 officers in a police cruiser in July and fired 17 rounds into their car. Officer Anthony Mazurkowicz, 29-year vet of the Department of Rochester Police Department, was rushed to the hospital where he died of his injuries. Mazurkowicz was a husband, father of 4 grown children, and grandfather to 3. He received numerous awards for his work and had also received the Good Conduct Award every year with the department. Rochester's mayor talked about it.
This is a nightmare for any family. But it's punctuated even harder when that person is a police officer and you know every day there's a chance that that kiss you give your loved one could be the last one.
Mazurkowicz's partner survived the attack. A 15-year-old girl was in her home at the time of the shooting and was grazed in the head by a bullet. Suspect charged with second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder. And in June, in Spokane, Washington, 2 suspects recorded themselves while they hunted for police officers to attack. The Spokane County Sheriff explained what happened.
They've identified a police officer coming into the area. The officer is actively trying to get away from them right now. They're going to start hearing gunfire right about here. Right there. That's when the other SPD officer came into view. And they switched target from her to him.
The suspects crashed and were caught trying to run away. They're facing multiple charges, including attempted first-degree murder. Officer Chris Honecker suffered gunshot wounds to his leg and his head. He and Officer Michelle Kernkamp, who who was also targeted but was not injured, were honored by the local Shriners over the weekend with their Officer of the Year award. These aren't just examples of police officers dying in the line of duty, which is horrible enough. This is police being targeted and ambushed. Joining me now is the Spokane County, Washington Sheriff, Ozzie Knezovich, who you just saw in the video. Sheriff, thanks very much for being here. Appreciate it. Look, you've been very outspoken on this topic. What do you think is causing not just violence against law enforcement, but in many cases, the targeting of law enforcement?
Dan, it's really not hard to figure out what's happened here. This is the result of radicalized hate, and that hate is against our police officers, our deputies, and it's on both the left and the right. In 2020, the left ramped it up to a degree that we haven't seen before, and you cannot continue to demonize law enforcement officers and think that you're not going to inspire somebody to take out their frustrations on that officer or that deputy. This is radicalized hate. Is happening here, and it happened yesterday in Toronto.
It did happen. I was going to mention Toronto as well, where literally officers having lunch, and he gets targeted in this way. In Spokane, what you talked about, the suspects actually recorded themselves ambushing the officers. And I could tell when you held that press conference, we didn't play all of it, obviously, you were infuriated not just at what happened, but also about how the media sometimes responds to these kinds of incidents.
It's not sometimes, Dan. The media has been at war with law enforcement since 2014. In August 2014, we had the event in Ferguson. And what the media told the American public never happened in Ferguson. Okay. Michael Brown was not shot with his hands up. He was shot after taking the gun away from the police officer. The officer was able to get his gun back, and Michael Brown was not shot surrendering. That was a narrative that was given by the media and activists to the American people. It's never been corrected. If anybody reads the DOJ report on that, they learn very rapidly that Michael Brown should not be the poster child for any activist use in this.
Totally true, and we've covered that here on this show as well. You're absolutely right about the Michael Brown incident. Let me play a piece of sound for you. This is the police chief in Lexington, Kentucky. This is today expressing his frustration at the violence in his city. The city's on a record pace for homicides. 9 people were shot in the city over the weekend. This is Chief Lawrence Weathers.
It's time to stop all this nonsense and realize that you've got a different community here and start appreciating what your police do for you. Start appreciating what your E911 workers do for you. Start appreciating what your fire department does for you. Start appreciating what your corrections officers do for you. That's what we need when we say community involvement. We need you to be involved with public safety.
Sheriff, I don't know if you had heard that before, but I have to tell you, when I heard that, I was ready to clap my hands.
Yeah, he's absolutely spot on. And the harsh reality is our elected officials and activists have not done that. They've done everything to turn citizens against their own law enforcement. 2020 was an extreme year of that. Now they're all trying to back away from it. They're all trying to walk that back. But it's impossible to walk back something that you did in such a magnitude throughout the entire year. There's certain genies you cannot put back in the bottle once you release them.
Well, and I think
it is causing violence in our community.
I apologize for interrupting you, but I just was going to agree with you on that point about putting the genie back in the bottle. Once you demonize law enforcement the way that they were demonized in 2020 across the board, it is very hard to then just go back and say, come on, no, the cops are all the good guys, because it seems disingenuous. It seems dishonest. And it's critical that there are people out there who are consistent in their support for law enforcement, and I try to do that on this program. I try to be consistent regardless of the political group that is attacking law enforcement. If there's no evidence of wrongdoing by law enforcement, I'm going to be out there saying, don't blame law enforcement, and you should be appreciating law enforcement every day. And Sheriff, I think one of the things that you have said, and you and I have talked about this, is just day to day, the appreciation for law enforcement. Because I'll bet you that the vast majority of your officers and deputies are getting support from folks in the community. It's just when you look at it from the media perspective, it's a different story.
You know, the support from the community is off the charts. I hear it all the time from men and women out on the street. And I tell our people on a daily basis, it seems like, mom and pop respect you, mom and pop love you. Yeah. It is the activists and certain politicians, and you know, a lot of people like to always throw the left as the poster child for this, but I've actually heard politicians on the right to say the same thing. So it's the extremes on both the left and the right that are killing our nation. They have made our nation an unsafe nation. Crime is through the roof. We can't get through a weekend in Spokane without a shooting anymore. And we need the public to help us stop this before another young person dies on the streets and another deputy or another police officer dies on the streets. It is up to the citizens to say no more and stop electing officials that talk this way.
Sheriff, we need your message to be heard loud and clear. That's why we asked you to come back on the show. Really appreciate your time again tonight.
Thank you very much, Dan.